everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Eve Phillips, and I lead the product team for Chrome Enterprise and Education. What I'd like to talk about today is how a new breed of worker has emerged. We think of these as the value creators, or the cloud workers. And this isn't about some far future of work. This is a change that's already happening, and it's accelerating. And it's probably something you already know, because most likely many of you are already cloud workers, which is what we see so much more of the global workforce actually becoming. And so what do we mean when we talk about cloud workers? You've probably already heard this a bunch of times today and yesterday. Well, we've actually got a definition for this. So we talk about how they spend over 3 hours a day in the browser using web apps and other types of applications. They're untethered from device and location, and we'll talk a lot about that and how Chrome plays into that too. And they're not just searching for information, but they're using that information to develop insights and make critical decisions. And so we see this change happening, but we know it can be really difficult, both from a technology and a change management perspective. From change management and perspectives, we've really had this kind of ingrained process built into us in the way we work. That we've got assigned desks, that there's a 9 to 5 time, that there's specific work time, and then there's family or home time. But it turns out actually a lot of us don't really like that model. We all want to get our work done, we want to do our work well, but we just want more flexibility over where we work and when we work. And so this is where the new tools come in. And we'll, of course, talk a lot more about these new tools. But this is where these tools can really help organizations help their workforce transition to becoming cloud workers so that they can improve both their productivity and their flexibility. So that's why we want to talk to you about Chrome Enterprise. And what Chrome Enterprise is, it's a browser, it's an OS, and it's devices, all highly secure, highly flexible, and built for the enterprise. Our goal with Chrome Enterprise is to help IT and end users focus time on driving value and not configuring VPNs, updating virus protection, or worrying about where you left some file. We want to help the IT professional enable the workforce to leverage the full value of the cloud, and these are the tools to do it. So how does this happen? Well, your strategy for Chrome, for cloud workers, as we see it, really needs to start with the endpoints. So you need to look at the devices that people carry and ensure the OS and the browser on those devices, because the browser is that key gateway to the cloud, is set up to enable the security and productivity that your organization requires. And Chrome OS was born in the cloud. We had the advantage, when we started Chrome OS, that we could think cloud first and learn from all the generations of OSs before it, so that the core security tenets of Chrome OS were put into place to better defend against cloud-based risks. And we think a lot about collaboration. From our startup speeds in Chrome OS and the automatic updates that all happen behind the scenes and don't impact the end user. These are all things that help workers collaborate more quickly without waiting for some system update. And security. You've probably heard us mention this before, you'll hear it again, because it is at the core of both Chrome browser and Chrome OS. On the browser side, for example, we've got studies that show how we can catch more phishing attacks than our competitors and leave your workers more secure and better to be able to get their work done. And of course, working from anywhere. One of the things we did with both of these tools, both at the browser and the OS, is abstract the user policies from the devices and the application itself. So you can get the same experience as the end user anywhere you log in, and as the organization, you know that those policies will follow the user wherever they're doing their work. So for you, as a worker, you can go home, and if you have to log into your work email, as much as you may not want to, you'll know you get all that same experience and those same policies from home as you would from your workplace. And then you'll be glad that you chose Chrome. And just because there might be a few finance people around or some that you might need to convince that this is actually a good idea, let me just talk a little bit about some of the data we've put out. And you can find more information on this on our website and download some tools to figure out what the TCO benefits of Chrome can look like for you. But we provisioned a particular study with ESG to look at the annual per device savings of using Chrome OS. And it's almost $500 a year. And this is all about minimizing the cost of things like backups and virus updates and software updates and hardware, a lot of updates, patching, et cetera. Because Chrome OS actually requires so much less of this type of work than some of the other options that are out there. And by the way, a lot of people think of Chrome and Chrome devices and say, oh, because they're less expensive devices, that's why it must be cheaper. This doesn't even get into the cost of the hardware. But yes, you can often actually purchase less expensive devices to get the same amount of work done, which is another way that your organizations can save money and you can invest it into other places. And at the end of the day, this is really about helping IT be able to spend their time on things that are driving more value and not virus protection, and then the end user be able to get their work done. So let's talk about the value of Chrome Enterprise to kind of the two key audiences, your business leadership and your workforce. We know we can't just solve for one of them. It's great if it's a low TCO device, but if people don't want to use it, it doesn't really matter. At the end, so we need to both cover the business side, where we need to make sure Chrome is secure, it's got granular control, so you can make sure folks are doing on their devices what it is you want them to be doing, and it's a smart investment. And for the end users, you want to make sure people have the apps that they need, that they can work efficiently, and that they've got devices that they get excited about. And so I'm going to take you through some slides here to talk about what we're doing from a roadmap perspective for each of these types of user groups to make Chrome Enterprise a great option for your organization. All right, so on the admin side, so we'll talk about a couple different areas here. The admin experience, the application controls, because what apps people use and how you can manage those apps as an organization is a kind of a key control area. And then everyone's favorite topic, compliance. So Chrome Enterprise. Some of you may be familiar. Last year, we launched Chrome Enterprise, which enables you to enforce policies across a wide range of criteria around devices, users, and applications. We've got over 200 policies, both again crossing users and devices. Lets you do things like fleet management, update management, et cetera. We also talked about with this launch some of the EMM and identity options. So with the launch last fall, we talked about our first partner, AirWatch, that you can work with, that we're opening up our APIs to. And then over the course of the year, we've actually added a number of additional EMM partners that we're really excited to be working with that you can now manage your Chrome devices through. In addition, you can always use Google Identity tools with Chrome devices, but you can also use Active Directory. So we know a lot of organizations are still using Active Directory, and we want to make sure those organizations can also start to use Chrome. And then, of course, 24/7 support. We've got an amazing support team to be there if you need that help. We, of course, hope you don't, and usually you won't, but if it's there if you need it. But we don't want to rest on what we've already done. So let me talk to you a little bit about what's coming next. So for those of you who have used the admin panel where you manage your Chrome devices, and we're actually launching a complete UX refresh. And we're, of course, very excited about that because we think it makes it easier to find things and get the tasks done that you need to do. But it also makes it much faster. So you'll see just faster page loads, faster to get to what you need to do. So super excited about that. Some of the first pages are now in what we call our Trusted Tester program. And you'll be seeing more of that out in our production over the course of this year. We're also adding more features around OS updates and controls. So I think a lot of folks are familiar with that Chrome 6-week update cycle, which is great for making sure your devices stay secure when we know that there are threats that are coming out all of the time, and you want to make sure your devices are protected. But we also know that 6 weeks can be a really rapid cycle for an enterprise that needs to test and make sure their internal apps work and everything else that may be dependent on the operating system that's being run. So we have certain tools, and we're adding more so that you can make sure that this updates in the release cycles that happen for your devices is consistent with your testing models, with what works for your organization. We're also adding more reporting features. So we know this is actually an area I think we can do a lot of very innovative work around. We'll be adding kind of more capabilities over the course of this year, and I think next year you can see some stuff that's really innovative. And one thing we're doing is we're bringing browser management into the admin console. So there's whole sessions on this here at Next, so hopefully you'll get a chance to learn some more if this is of interest. But for those of you that manage Chrome browser across other operating systems, maybe through GPO or other mechanisms, now you'll have the ability to manage it straight from the Google admin console. So if you're also using Chrome devices or you're using G Suite, it'll be much easier to jump in and actually do some of that Chrome browser management too. And we plan to bring more features into that admin console experience so that you can really make the most of not just setting policies for your users, but really understanding how your users are using browser and how that can help you make better decisions about what kinds of features and capabilities you might want to add. And then finally, we're doing more, this is kind of attached to our reporting work, but we're doing more to enable admins to access some of the real-time logs and the other information that we produce to make it more accessible and usable for admins. And one area I want to touch on a little bit in this kind of experience model is zero-touch enrollment. So this is something we're putting a lot of investment into. We already sort of think of Chromebooks as fast and easy to deploy within an organization, but we want to make that even better. So this is an opportunity for folks, what you'll see when this gets rolled out, and we're testing this now, is when you purchase through an authorized partner, devices essentially can get shipped directly to the end user, already pre-configured for your organization. So once that device hits the internet, it can get enrolled. It knows which organization it should get enrolled to, and then the user logs in and they get their user policies, and kind of automatically everything is where it's supposed to be. And so it basically lets you skip a step if either working with where before you would have had to have a higher touch to make sure the device actually got touched by someone, by an admin typically, to make sure it was properly enrolled, et cetera. We're taking that away to just make it much easier when you want to get Chromebooks to kind of folks across potentially globally, that you can do so easily and know that they're getting a device that has all the appropriate policies from your organization and for that user that you would want. And one other piece about that is like these devices also stay enrolled. So one of the features that we're rolling out that's related to this is around forced re-enrollment. So if a device for whatever reason gets unenrolled, or you need to wipe a device, et cetera, now you can set it so that device will automatically get re-enrolled back to your organization, so it doesn't somehow end up in a state where you don't want it to be. So we think these things all kind of work nicely together to make sure you can get devices wherever you need them to be with the least amount of hassle possible. And one other thing, if you've been over to Moscone West, you may have seen on the 3rd floor, we've got a whole grab and go set up. So if you actually want to go try out a Chromebook for the conference, you can go grab one and test this. But this is a setup that we've been using internally at Google for some time. So imagine you got to work, you forgot your laptop, or maybe you dumped a cup of coffee on it or whatever. For some reason, your laptop is not working. Well, if you're a Googler, you can actually go to any of our grab and go stations, grab a Chromebook, sign in, and use it for the day, and put it right back. And because of some of the great features of Chrome, which makes it very shareable, very secure between different users, this actually works really well. But obviously, we built a bit of technology around that to manage the whole experience about how Grab and Go works, make sure that the user gets the right kind of messaging when they turn on the Chromebook, and make sure that the admin capabilities could track, kind of where these devices, who was using these devices, et cetera. And so what we've done is actually make that whole set of technology around kind of the core Chrome OS for Grab and Go available to outside organizations. So this is something where we've got it in testing now again, and if it's something you're interested, please talk to us. We'd love to sign you up for one of our tests. But it's also a great way, if you're interested in sort of seeing how Chrome can work for your organization, to start introducing Chromebooks to a population, and they can kind of use it for a day and say, I actually can get all my work done on this, and it's light, and it's easy, and stuff is in the cloud, and I don't worry about things. There's a lot of benefits to Chromebook, and the best way for folks at the end of the day to experience it is by experiencing it directly. So moving on to apps, app distribution, and just apps in general. So let's talk about this, because there's a lot of sort of thoughts that, okay, Chromebooks are kind of limited in the apps they can run, especially when things first started. It was mostly a web browser. You could just run web apps. Well, happy to tell you that is very different today. We've made huge strides in the kinds of apps that you can run on a Chromebook. So again, folks can get their work done. So of course, last year, as you may recall, we brought Android apps through Managed Google Play to the ecosystem. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we've also added a whole set of policies and controls so you can make sure folks are getting the Android apps you want them to, and maybe not the ones that you don't want them to. Folks can also, of course, manage or access web apps through the browser. We also partner with a number of different VDI solutions like VMware and Citrix, so that you can run Win32 apps and other hosted apps within the Chrome device. And of course, something else you may have heard us mention recently is we're now able to run Linux apps. So this is something that's in beta now. But we'll be doing more work around this because we recognize that for developers and other particular use cases, it can be very useful to run a Linux app on a Chromebook. And so we've been, this is something that we've been working on and are really excited to roll out. So one of our big announcements here is, we took the Play Store out of beta for consumers at the end of last year, but enterprises have more requirements, and we want to make sure all the management capabilities, et cetera, were also in place. And so now for this week, we are announcing that the Managed Google Play is also out of beta. So over 50 Chromebook models now support Android applications, and pretty much any Chromebook you buy now will support these, the ability to add Android apps. There's great enterprise apps. You can see some of the ones there from Adobe, from Trello, from Cisco, et cetera. You can pick which apps, you can use whitelisting and blacklisting to decide which apps you actually want, as I mentioned. But you can rest assured as well that the Play Store screens every app that's there. So there's the apps themselves have been heavily secured. but we recognize that from a productivity or for other perspectives that you may want people to focus on certain apps, and you can set that up for your organization. And then, of course, we offer a lot of cloud policies, again, so that you can decide which apps you want people to have access to. And so that's what I was just sort of mentioning there. And so some of those specific capabilities that we offer around app management include things like managed configurations, these whitelists and blacklists, reporting on whether apps installed, because you can set, for example, apps to be installed to specific devices. And so this is some of the stuff that we're working on so that you can actually, you'll know which apps got installed where and if there's ever any issues. Caching of the APKs, so in areas where you may have shared devices. We've talked a little bit about this, but Chromebooks are great if you want to have a mini-to-one or one-to-many. But in that mini-to-one scenario, you may have different users using the same apps. It's kind of a waste if they each have to download that same app over and over again. So this is the APK caching lets it be much more efficient in how it downloads apps to multiple users. And then continuing to expand these apps and this app capability to more of our EMMs. So these are some of the things that we're working on for the rest of this year, and we'll be excited to release more broadly. And then compliance. So these are some of the great acronyms that take up a lot of our time. May take up some of your time as well, but we wanted to make sure we talked about this because we know it's so critical that not only that Google is compliant with the local laws and regulations, but that we offer the tools that customers need to also make sure that they're compliant with the laws when they use our products. And so in the last year, we actually achieved compliance for Chrome Enterprise as a data processor. This is part of the GDPR regulations. And we published a data processing amendment for that. And we also published ISO and SOC certificates to attest to the security and privacy guarantees that we provide to customers when we process their data as part of Chrome Enterprise. So happy to talk about this more offline as well, but we take all of this very seriously and are pleased to be able to kind of report back in terms of some of the certifications, et cetera, that we've achieved. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about what we've been working on in terms of the end user experience, that cloud worker that we've been talking about. And here we'll just break it down into a few different categories. The applications, kind of what your users are doing, so we'll talk about the user side of that. The efficiency, or how they're doing it. And the hardware, what they're doing it on. Or as we like to say, this is about the cool apps, the cool features, and the cool devices that the teams are working hard on behind the scenes. So with applications, we talked a little bit about this Linux support before. But we've heard a lot of interest in this, first from developers, because a lot of developers develop on Linux, and so it's a great way to let folks use a Chromebook, but be able to use all of their standard development tools. But it's also, we've heard other interesting use cases for this as well. And so this is stuff that we're, again, in kind of the early stages of. So we're also looking for feedback from all of you as you start to use this or think about using Linux apps on Chrome within your organizations, where folks may have legacy apps that actually run on Linux, and other options for how they actually get those apps distributed to their workforce are not particularly attractive. So this kind of capability where you can run that app as an icon on your Chromebook is actually a much cheaper and easier way and a much more future-proofed way to make sure that app can be used by the people that need to use it. In the interim, before that app, eventually probably moves to a more modern infrastructure. And then there's G Suite. So we think a lot about G Suite magic and how do we make sure that G Suite on Chrome is the best G Suite experience you can get. And so, in addition, from the admin perspective, where you have all the products kind of right there in your admin console, for users, we want to make sure they can actually access G Suite apps right from the dock. So super easy to make sure that everything that they need is right there. So that can increase the usage and adoption of the G Suite apps within the enterprise. And then Google Drive. So Google Drive is actually already integrated into our native file apps on Chrome OS. And then starting in M69, is our team drive. So those of you who use team drives will also be integrated into the native file apps, which we know has been a big request from a number of organizations. And you'll also get to see more, and one of the other things that's coming is you'll get to see more about what's being stored offline and online. So we have great offline capabilities, but we've recognized that we need to work on some of the user experience of making sure people know what's available, what's not available. And so that's one of the things that will be coming. And then on stylus-enabled devices, and you may have seen some of the devices like the Pixelbook as a stylus, et cetera. We're going to be rolling out a the ability to use the note-taking app, Google Keep, in the lock screen. So instead of having to unlock the device to take a note or just to jot something down, really trying to reduce that friction so you can just take that note in the lock screen. So it doesn't give you the access to the rest of the device because that would be insecure, but you can take a note on something and then it's saved to the device. And so, again, just trying to make it really easy for these devices. Oh, I want to grab that and write something down in a meeting to be super useful and super productive. So now we want to take a little bit of a look at how folks are doing things on a device and try to make this device a great experience for users so it just works and there are minimal barriers between the user and what they want to get done. So there's some things around just device fundamentals. So we spent a lot of time working on making sure printing is working, and we're continuing to add more features to manage enterprise printing. And multi-monitor, very similar, continuing to work on the features to make sure you can just plug your Chromebook into a dock and all of your monitors work as well. But there's other things we're adding in addition to this. So one of the things is making sure identity is more consistent across all the different layers. And that includes identity for your Android apps. We recognize it's not, if those of you who have added Google Play to a Chrome device, it may not always be the smoothest process. That is something we're fixing and going to make much easier to work across the different places where today you have to put in your identity. And also make it really easy to switch between identities. We think it's really powerful for the enterprise workforce to have a really easy way to switch to their personal identity and then back to the work identity as long as they can do it in a safe and secure way. And this goes back to that cloud worker concept. People want to be able to work when they need to work, but also need to sometimes switch into a different mode and then be able to switch back. And so we want to create the devices that make that super simple, where people can feel very secure about where their data is and who's controlling what, but make sure the organization can enable that if they want, but also has the right controls in place for what's important to them. And then one of the things that we'll also be looking at is I mentioned some of the offline capabilities as well, and some of the and being able to bring the UI updates and other capabilities back into our Files app. So these are things that'll just be super critical for just your everyday use and just making it easier to move files around within Chrome OS and if you're switching between devices, et cetera. And then touch and input. So we do think a lot about the hardware. We work really closely both with our internal hardware team as well as our OEM partners. And so there's a lot of work going on to make the experience with the physical device great for Chrome OS users. And so you'll see more and more devices from us across that are in particular are focusing on touch, are focusing on stylus, on the convertible use case, because we're seeing kind of more and more, especially around convertible adoption in the enterprise of these kinds of devices and moving beyond just the traditional clamshell. And so some of the areas that we're investing in to make these a great experience are reducing the latency of the stylus so that it feels more and more like a pen as you use it. Building a really great predictive keyboard. So just making that on the virtual side to make that a better experience. And then I mentioned the lock screen note-taking, which again is a kind of a stylus-driven experience, but should drive efficiency. And then ML, everybody's favorite topic. So there's a lot of machine learning that actually goes into the guts of a Chromebook. And so there's a few places where this actually plays out into the user experience. So one big piece of this is around personalization. So the apps that you see in your launcher, we're using a lot of ML and we'll be using more around to make sure that you're seeing the apps that we think are most relevant for you to launch at any given time. And for those not familiar with the launcher, it's essentially the button you click and you see your apps pop up. What do you want to use? And that's obviously, it's more useful if the right ones pop up. Everything's always there, but we want to make it, again, just make it super fast and efficient for you to get to what you need to do. And so there's a bunch of features we're coming out with around that. And then system resource management. This is the stuff you don't think about until you really need to think about it, and you're running out of power, and you got to go to a meeting, et cetera. And so we're doing a lot of stuff thinking around power management and adaptive brightness. So the device only uses kind of the minimum amount of power you need, so you don't really notice that it's using power, right? Or it's trying to adapt to you. And so this is something that it improves the overall experience of the Chromebook. So you can go out there and be confident of your 10-hour battery life. But we're doing a lot of things behind the scenes to actually make that possible. And then finally, the inputs and interactions, we just talked a little bit about those things, but some of the ML that's behind some of that we're working on, things like palm rejection while you're drawing. A lot of time your palm hits. We want to make sure we don't pay attention to that, right? And so that's actually some really interesting technology that goes into that. And then OCR of handwriting, that's another area that we're spending a lot of time and working with some teams to make sure that as you take those notes, I can't even read my own handwriting after, but maybe Google can. So that's what I'm hoping anyway. And we always want to talk about accessibility too, because we want to make sure these devices work for all cloud workers. And so some of the stuff we're working on there is around a dock magnifier, so you can make it larger, enabling Chromevox on our Android applications, and then select to speak by highlighting content. So again, additional ways to make sure all of these features are more accessible to everybody. And premium hardware. So you will be seeing more announcements from us around devices. Really excited to see. There's a lot of focus on the team to make sure we've got more premium enterprise devices. 8 gigs of RAM or more. High quality finishes, et cetera. Core processors and the kinds of devices that your organization and you personally most likely want to make sure that you use. So I'll wrap up here, and I can take questions. If you want to kind of stay in the loop of what's going on, we've actually recently revamped our release notes, so very proud to talk about this. Feel free to check those out on the web, and they'll talk about what's coming up. Thank you all, and there's more Chrome sessions throughout the next today and tomorrow and Thursday as well that we'd love to have you guys join us at, but I'm happy to take any other questions about any of the stuff that I've mentioned here today.